On this week's prequel episode, we follow up on our Rope listener polls and preview Vampire Academy. Hello and welcome back to This Film Is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. It's another prequel week, and we have quite a bit of feedback to get to on Rope, so we'll jump right into our patron shoutouts.
I put up with you because your father and mother were our finest patrons, that's why.
No new patrons this week, but we do have our Academy Award winners, and they are Nicole Goebel, Eric, Harpo Rat, Nathan, Vic Apocalypse, Matilde, Steve from Arizona, Int Draft, Teresa Schwartz, Ian from Wine Country, Kelly Napier, Gratch, Just Gratch. Shelby says if Batman and Catwoman can be in-game in the comics, so can Spidey and Deadpool, you cowards. That darn skag, V. Frank, and Alina Starkov. Thank you all so much for your continued support. Make sure you're getting in those patron requests, which I think everybody is. We're scheduled so far out now.
Yeah.
I think we're getting
Yeah, we have a bit of a backlog.
Yes, so appreciate that, but we will get to them all one day. Katie, it's time to see what the people had to say about this patron request as we do our listener poll follow-up for Rope.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
All right, we had a lot of feedback on Patreon.
Mm-hmm.
And we had just like kind of a heads up. We had like comments that spread across multiple comments and multiple posts and some conversations. So not everything is in like the order that you might expect.
Order, yes.
Mostly because there was one particular question that we had during the episode that there was a conversation about, and I tried to put all of that stuff like together.
Yes.
So just a heads up on that.
Yeah.
But on Patreon, we had 3 votes for the movie and 2 for the book. Eric said, "Thanks so much for covering this play/movie. I have so many things to say. I apologize."
And Eric was the patron that requested this. Yes. Okay. Just making sure.
"I'm glad you disagree with those who at the time thought that Rope was an ambitious failure. I agree. I find the tension in this movie delicious and very effective. And other than some on-the-nose dialogue, I think it's a fantastic movie. I also dislike the ending over-the-top speech by Rupert, especially this Rupert, who I don't think fully addressed the issue. He says that Brandon and Philip twisted his words to have a meaning he never dreamed of. Literally, what other meaning could his words have? By changing Rupert's philosophy to be more overt and a more direct call to go murder people if you think you're better than them, I just don't think the movie totally made that make sense. If you're literally telling your students that you think it's cool to murder people who are in front of you in line for a movie and double down when asked if it's a joke and insist that you're not kidding, what did you expect impressionable kids to take away from that?"
Okay, so we have a lot of comments in this vein.
Yeah.
And I will say this, I don't disagree, but I feel like there is a specific type of person this
absolutely a specific type of person
this movie is criticizing and holding up here. And the fact that because a lot of comments are like, what other possible interpretation do you think these kids could have, and how are you so stunned at the end? I think that's the point. And the point is that Rupert lives in this world of, like, when he says at the end, "Oh, you twisted my words" and stuff, obviously they didn't. They just applied the thing that he was saying. Mm-hmm. The point is that because Rupert lives in such a detached, academic, navel-gazy, like a bubble kind of, mm-hmm. he expresses these opinions and he maybe even believes them to some extent, but actually seeing them played out is something that he can't really wrap his head around. And it stuns him completely at the end when somebody actually goes through with the thing he's saying, because I think in his head it is, no matter how much he pretends to actually believe it and plays coy about what his actual beliefs are, he's never really thought through this stuff. Not thought through it, but I don't know how to express this, but like, I have met this person,
yes,
whose beliefs are abhorrent, but and I think these people are more common than maybe you think, whose beliefs, if taken to their logical endpoint, result in terrible things, but people hold contradictory, ridiculous beliefs like that all the time. And maybe not even contradictory, but beliefs that they don't practice, and if practiced would be terrible. People hold those beliefs all the time, and it's kind of part of being like human to some extent, but specifically I think it's an inherent flaw that, or not an inherent flaw, I think it's a fault that a lot of people are guilty of not fully extrapolating their views out to the logical or the practical application of them, even if what you're saying is literally it's fine, it should be fine for superior people to murder inferior people. It literally takes somebody doing that for him to have that crisis of conscience and realize that his like again, introspective sort of detached academic exploration of that is not worth anything. It is actually is bad. I don't know. I'm having a hard time putting it into words, but do you get what where I'm going?
Yeah, and I feel like you could maybe liken it to internet discourse.
Yes. No, I agree, because that. Yes. Yeah.
I think you could liken it to like an example that's coming straight to the top of my mind is that I run in a lot of internet circles where people tend to call for bloody revolution.
Right.
A lot.
Yes.
And like, bring out the
Yes.
guillotines and da-da-da-da.
Firebomb Walmart, etc. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I can empathize.
Yes.
with a
sentiment.
lot of the sentiment and a lot of the like frustration and
Yes.
anger behind that. But I also think that the majority of the people who call for those things
Yes.
would actually be horrified to find themselves in those situations.
Yes, and there's a very famous tweet that is very controversial for a lot of reasons, but it's in regard to this specific topic, that is the voting pales in comparison to my strategy of firebombing a Walmart, and then they don't firebomb a Walmart. Like that's
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
and it's not a perfect like
No,
one-to-one
no.
comparison of what's going on in this movie and in this play, but I do think that.
But I think that's a very good example.
I think
yeah.
it's a good example in that I do believe that a majority of the people who go on the internet
Yes.
and call for us to firebomb Walmarts,
and
if people actually started going out and firebombing Walmarts,
Yes.
they would be like, oh, hey, wait a minute. Wait just a second.
Yeah, and obviously maybe that's not a good example. And again, that tweet is also kind of tongue-in-cheek, specifically the specific example of firebombing a Walmart, because a lot of people come back and go, well, actually, that's not what we're calling for. We're calling for blah, 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 this, that, and the other. But yes, the wider, broader concept of a violent leftist revolution, which, again, I am sympathetic to philosophically in a lot of ways. But, as soon as people went out and started guillotining politicians or whatever, or CEOs, it becomes a whole different thing.
Yes, it becomes real.
Yes,
then.
in a way that I don't know if a lot of the people who espouse those views would be completely on board with in the same way that Rupert.
I do think that, yes, what we see here is kind of a similar idea of Rupert has been espousing these ideas without really considering what that looks like in reality. And then when he's confronted with that reality, he's also forced to confront what his ideas have been.
And he tries to distance it from, he goes, oh, well, what makes you think you're superior to him, and blah, blah, blah. And like, oh, he kind of has to reckon with what he was saying, and like whether or not what they did actually even coincides with what he thought he was saying, that sort of thing. And so like, because again, we're going to get this comment a lot, and I'm going to just address it here because I don't, we're not going to repeat it like 6 times. But yeah, I think that to me, it still works despite being like ridiculous. Like when you get to the end, you are like, come on, man, you were literally just 30 minutes ago in this movie insisting that no, you really believed that inferior people or the superior man should be is outside of the traditional moral system and can do as they please, essentially, and they're not held to the same morals because of their superiority and that sort of thing. But again, seeing that writ bare and the fruits of that philosophy actually played out in front of you, of course, that like they did exactly the thing you said, but like
Yes.
that's the point.
But
like
seeing it played out in front of you is a far different thing than
Yeah.
sitting around chit-chatting about the philosophy behind
while
it.
you sip martinis at a dinner
Yeah.
party. Yeah. And I think that's the point. I think I almost think that is the fact that it is such an obvious, like, well, duh, man, that's what you were saying. Of like, why are you surprised it's like, yeah, because I think the movie is saying his vacuous sort of like academic ponderance of this philosophical idea and support of it is what's bad. And that, yes, of course it should have played out. Like, of course, this is the result of what he was saying. I don't know. We're just going around in circles here, but I think it still works, but I kind of understand where some people are coming from in that it kind of like takes them out of it a little bit to be like, well, what did you think you were saying?
I mean, but I think both things can be true at the same time. Like, yeah, it is true that, like, what did you think was going to happen? Like, that is true. But I think it's also true that this is a certain type of person who is espousing, these ideas without having actually thought through what that looks like in reality, and then is forced to confront that.
And this may be controversial, but I think this is also true. The example we used was like violent leftist revolution or whatever, but I think this is also true to some extent on the extreme right or whatever of people who, like the most overt, I don't want to give them too much credit because I do think that a lot of them do mean it, but or would be fine with it ultimately. But I do think there is not a non-small subset of people on the internet who like to LARP as Nazis and stuff that they're actually concentration camps might not be so chill about it, or like might not like support it in the same way. I don't know. I could be wrong about that. And again, I'm not inclined to give shithead right-wing trolls on the internet any sort of benefit of the doubt. But I do think that kind of it's a similar type of thing that maybe were that to come to pass, some of those people would not be like as
okay with it
as they think they would be. Yeah, I think.
Maybe.
And again, I could be wrong about that. And again, I think I'm very much, I don't know. I just think it's interesting because I do think it's kind of it's one thing to talk about a thing and say like, oh yeah, I believe this thing. It's a whole other thing when you see the results of that thing you said you believe play out in front of you actually manifest. And then, whether or not, you still believe that thing you thought earlier was true or not is, whatever.
All right. Eric went on to say, I agree and am thankful that there doesn't seem to be any tie between Brandon and Philip's sexuality/relationship to the murder. It's just another unspoken undercurrent, another secret they're concealing from their guests. Though people generally say the play is more overt with the gay subtext, I think the movie actually is. In the play, Brandon and Philip, or Wyndham and Charles, seem to be younger. They're explicitly still in college, so it makes more sense that they're rooming together. And they're not planning on going to Brandon's mother's home after the murder, they're planning to go back to school. While movie Brandon and Philip both seem to be out of college, yet they still live together, vacation together, visit Brandon's mother together. To me, the vibes are stronger there. That is a fair point that I had not considered either. Yeah. They were roommates. Some fans think there's subtext of Rupert potentially having had a relationship with Brandon previously. There's a few lines they go off of, that Rupert has stayed at Brandon's mother's farm, the line about Brandon staying up all night at the master's feet, referring to Rupert, and Brandon's general desperation to please and emulate Rupert. But I think casting Jimmy Stewart, who know nothing about even the subtext between Brandon and Philip, and definitely doesn't play it as if he had anything to do with Brandon beyond being his teacher, mitigates this.
Yeah, I know we had several comments, I think, or maybe just this one about that the potential relationship between Rupert and Brandon, and I did not get that. But these little bits from the story I could see it.
Yeah, I could see it. I also agree with Katie. I think the movie is much better than the play. Just that one change of making all the characters connected to David makes the tension much better, the interactions more interesting, and make more logical sense. Why would Brandon even bother inviting Kenneth and Layla if they didn't even know David? Also, very happy that y'all had a lot of love for John Dahl as Brandon. I agree, he's fantastic in the role. I also enjoyed watching Farley Granger fall apart as the night progresses. I can't tell if he feels guilty about the murder. He seems more afraid of getting caught and increasingly upset at Brandon for his need to make innuendos about the murder and orchestrating these situations that might get them found out. Love to see a man fall apart.
To me, he read as that he did feel guilty, that he did feel bad, kind of in a way of like once they had finally done it. Kind of similar to Rupert of like,
yeah, he has also been confronted
yes,
with the reality
of the situation, and is like, oh shit, that was fun to talk about. All right, up until we did it, and then we did it, and like, oh fuck, yeah, like I this is bad. Like I do think there's some level of guilt there. I think it's also a huge level of just not wanting to get caught. But to me, there's moments that read like he seems like he feels bad, like he does feel guilty.
And I think either way, Brandon's behavior does not help his situation and everything he has going on. While looking for a different quote, I found this one by Patrick Hamilton about the movie adaptation that I just had to share. Quote, I was heartbroken by the film of Rope. I had thought working with Hitchcock was going to be heaven and put everything I knew into it. However, he utterly rejected my script, got someone else to write it, and finally produced a film which I think, and all intelligent friends agree, was sordid and practically meaningless balls.
Interesting.
And very interesting. Because I felt like they were pretty similar, all things considered.
I think there could be a layer here where it's, to me, from what you said and having not read it, the book, the philosophical sort of, you talked about how in the movie they do kind of dumb down some of the philosophical discussions in a way to make it play a little bit better, and just more kind of broad for a general audience. And I think that specific thing, those specific changes to kind of like Rupert's philosophical discussions and stuff, to the original author could make it feel very like a minimal like a minimized and like a kind of dumbed down version of what he was trying to get across, which I think is totally fair, and that very well could be the case. And because I will say this, I agree that in general, I think there's still interesting things with Rupert and him confronting, you know, the fruits of his philosophical musings. But and I think that still works in the movie. But I think in general, the movie is most effective as just like a fun, like thriller suspense kind of thing.
Yeah, I would agree.
As
with that.
more of like a soapy kind of like experience, and not so much as like a really deep, compelling moral philosophy explore. You know what I mean? Like there's a little bit of that in the movie, but it's not like most of what the movie is doing. Most of what the movie is doing is like, isn't it wild that these two guys murdered this kid and he's in the thing they're serving dinner? You know, it is more, we're leaning into the spectacle and like the morbid fascination of like the event as opposed to like actually prying apart philosophically what's going on there, which I think maybe the playwright probably thought he was doing a lot more interesting things in the play than the movie.
That is fair.
Yeah.
And Eric's last comment was, anyway, I apologize for the long comments. Thank you again for covering this adaptation. Thank you for recommending it. We had fun talking about it.
Absolutely.
Our next comment was from Kelly Napier, who said, I appreciate the movie for the exercise that it was. Film students for years to come will be studying what Hitchcock did with the extended takes. But when you mention the movie, the enduring legacy is the artistic jump Hitchcock made with his direction and not the actual plot or acting of the movie itself.
I mean, I guess I could agree with the plot, potentially, but I think the acting is fantastic in the movie, for the most part.
Kelly went on to say, the play does a better job with the story and the characters. Despite knowing from minute one what the men had done to this kid, I found myself completely invested in what was going to happen next and if the crime would be discovered, despite the evidence being literally right in front of them.
I will say that was the exact experience I had watching the film, having not read the play. So
maybe the movie was also lessened for me because I had already listened to the play, and so a lot of the tension just didn't seem to be there anymore. Like the movie Memento, a lot of the thrill was gone after the first time.
I could see that.
I'd be interested to see who read the play versus listening to it. It's obvious Katie caught things I didn't catch since she read it and was able to get the stage directions, whereas I think the play struck me more because I was listening to a radio dramatization of it and was able to get very invested in what was going on.
I could totally see that. And that goes back to what you were saying.
Right. Well, and I think we had at least one other person who preferred the play who had also listened to it and not read it.
Yeah.
So maybe my assessment that it didn't matter that I hadn't seen it performed was incorrect because...
Oh, did you? Was that your assessment? Oh, I guess you did say that. But well, because you...
Well, I said that I thought I probably would have enjoyed it more had I watched it because reading it, I found a little boring.
Right.
But I also said that I didn't think that it would have made a difference in my assessment of movie versus book.
That's yes. And I think that's a slight distinction. But yeah, your point was that you still think you would have chosen the film over the radio play.
Right.
But you may have enjoyed the radio play more than just reading the play.
Right. But maybe I was incorrect to assume
I don't know.
that I would that I enjoyed the movie more than I would have enjoyed seeing the play or listening to the play.
Yeah.
Now, and Kelly does hit on here the reason that I ended up not listening to it because I considered listening to it because I felt like that would maybe be a little bit closer to watching it.
Right.
But when I opened it up and I saw the massive amount of stage direction, I was like, oh, maybe I better read it.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to make sure that I was getting all of the stuff that was hidden in that stage direction.
The real secret is to listen to it while also reading the stage direction.
No, see, I considered that too. That was what I was going to do originally because I often do that with audiobooks. I'll like listen and read along because that helps my poor addled brain stay focused. But again, I was worried that I was going to miss stuff if I kept having to pause it to read stage direction or like if I forgot to pause it, I was going to be reading the stage direction and I was going to miss things
and you were
that
gonna,
were happening. So I ended up just reading it.
That's fair. Yeah, because that's tough. Yeah, in that particular instance, if you're reading the stage direction, you're reading different words than what you're hearing, so it becomes like this kind of garbled mess in a way that could be a problem.
No, and I was worried, like
the radio play doesn't pause for the stage direction.
No, and I was worried that I would be too like distracted with the back and forth of like, oh, do I pause it? Do I skip it? What do I do? Sense. And that I would end up like not absorbing what I was reading and listening to.
That's fair. Makes sense.
Our next comment was from Steve from Arizona. And Steve said, I didn't read the book, and I consider the film in the middle of Hitchcock's filmography. But I give it to the film because I do love complicated and interesting camera work.
I do think, I don't know where I'd rank it among Hitchcock's films. I have not seen all of his film.
I haven't seen nearly enough Hitchcock to make an assessment at that.
I think I would agree in the sense that I don't know. I think I'd put it above The Birds. I thought The Birds is just like, it's not my favorite. I don't know what it is about it. It just doesn't do a lot for me. Rear Window, it'd be close. I think I might put Rear Window, I think above Rope just as a movie because I think it's maybe just like a slightly better overall film from my memory. It's been a while since we did it. North by Northwest, I think I would put above it as well. And then I'm trying to think, I've seen at least one other. Psycho, I think I would put above Rope. I just think Psycho's a more engrossing film, just generally. Even though there's a lot of moments I like in Rope, I don't think as a whole it quite lives up to something like Psycho or North by Northwest. So I think middle of his filmography probably is where I would rank it, from what I've seen at least.
Steve went on to say, so much of our modern camera techniques have been replaced with CGI-assisted work for the best and the worst. That opening in Touch of Evil is still the standard. Citizen Kane is still the torchbearer in modern film techniques. Brian's making a neither here nor there gesture.
Look, Citizen Kane, revolutionary. Lots of, and that's true in a sense. But I think that may be a little reductive of the level of modern film techniques that we can achieve. But I guess what he says, torchbearer. Yes, it is because I misinterpreted that sentence. It is the torchbearer in the sense that it is the monster upon which, or the giant upon which the shoulders of.
You can say monster. I won't judge you for it.
No, it is the giant upon whose shoulders modern films tend to be standing in a lot of different ways, in terms of camera techniques and shot composition and that sort of thing.
And then we have some more recent modern films like Russian Ark, Victoria, and Birdman that test the limits of modern equipment and CGI, blessing us with iconic cinematography, even if the subject matter is not always the most interesting.
I've not seen Russian Ark or Victoria. Birdman is the modern Rope.
Yes. Yeah.
In the sense that it is, and that one is doesn't have any, from my memory, actual cuts, whereas Rope has some distinct. The camera cuts and we cut to a different shot. I think in Birdman it is. There are cuts in Birdman, plenty of them. In fact, more than probably in Rope, because they're able to hide them more seamlessly with modern technology. But I believe it appears to all be one continuous shot in Birdman.
Style over substance will always win me over. Thanks for covering this film. I don't think it gets enough credit in the history of cinematography as other films do.
I would agree with that. It's one of those things people like kind of offhandedly mention, like, oh, Rope, that's that movie that Hitchcock did that has like, it's like all one take or looks like, big long takes or whatever. But it's not like brought up in the same way as other, like Citizen Kane or some of these other films in terms of, or like a Battleship Potemkin or whatever, in terms of like being this keystone piece of modern filmmaking and like modern like camera techniques and film techniques. But it definitely in some capacity is, or in some ways it definitely is.
All right, our next comment is from Shelby, and Shelby said, it comes down to the character of Rupert. I bought his spiel about the morality of murder in the play. The movie's version strained all credulity for the situation, especially the part about how he should be able to kill the working class over any inconvenience. Then he has the gall to say they twisted his words. No, dumbass, there was nothing to twist it into. Are you sad they didn't pick a waiter instead? He may not be responsible, but I have no sympathy for movie Rupert.
I will add, so this gets to our comment or conversation earlier, but I will add that I also have basically no sympathy for Rupert.
Yeah,
and I don't think the movie wants you
either.
to have sympathy for him. I don't think the movie wants you. He is kind of the protagonist of the film in the sense that like he's the one we're rooting for to like
to uncover the murder, the dastardly deed,
and like be the the detective that solves the murder and puts the bad guys away. But I don't think I did not feel bad for him. I did not feel sympathy for him. I felt like, yeah, you fucking idiot. Yeah. That's what happens when you say dumb shit like that. Like that is the you are now suffering the consequences of your rhetoric. And I honestly, at least it felt to me like that was the movie's point to some extent. Like I felt like the movie, because what they did so directly matched what he was saying. And he was so overt in being like, no, and insistent that what he was saying was what he believed, that is the point. Like, you idiot. Like, yeah, you can't just, again, your moral philosophizing is fun for you, but when people take it seriously and do it, it's
no longer fun for anybody.
Yeah.
And Shelby brought up specifically the difference between the play's version of his more murder morality speech and the movie's version of it, which we didn't talk about a minute ago. We did talk about it in the episode.
Yeah.
But and I did prefer the stronger through line and the stronger like connective tissue that there was in the movie. But yeah, it is correct that the trade-off for that is that his speech does seem a little more like over the top and on the nose in the movie.
Yeah.
Shelby went on to say, I also thought the play did a better job keeping the tension circling back to the chest and whether someone was going to open it. I liked the ticket as a clue better too. Other thoughts. I listened to the radio version before watching the movie, and I was right. I can't see anyone as anyone but Alan Rickman as Rupert. Though I think Jimmy Stewart does a fine job.
Did Alan Rickman do the radio play?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Interesting. You know, it was funny, and I don't know if this is as good a place as any to mention it. I had this thought about, I mentioned in the prequel, and I don't think I talked about this in the episode, that Jimmy Stewart said that he thought, what's his name? The guy who played Psycho, the actor who played Norman Bates. Anthony Perkins would have been a better choice for the role. And I don't know if this is what he was, maybe, this is maybe like a weird thing, But we talked about how there's some allusions in the play and stuff that maybe Rupert and Brandon had been in a relationship together. And I wonder if Jimmy Stewart also had like read that into the role and was like, well, I'm not gay. And so this guy would have been better for this. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. I legitimately thought if that was part of what, because I agree that he would have been great, that Perkins would have been great, but I do wonder if maybe he did this weird distancing himself from the role when people started like, I don't know, like critics and stuff, and people started appraising the film and being like, and like the queer subtext in it and stuff like that. If he was trying to distance himself from that, I don't know. That's complete speculation. But like, I could almost imagine him being like, I don't know, they should have got that gay guy to do it. Like, that to me almost feels like maybe, and that may be that's a very uncharitable reading for Jimmy Stewart of that. But I just kind of made me wonder if that's what he was getting at with that, recommending that Perkins should have done it. But anyways.
Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting question. I do think, to kind of go off on an only semi-related tangent from that, I do think it's possible that Jimmy Stewart's vibe as like an actor may have like strained the credulity of his role in this, because other than this, I think anything else I've ever seen him in, he plays a very like kind of everyman, kind of folksy almost.
Yes. He
sort
very
of
rarely
a character.
plays like the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah, he's more of a salt of the earth.
Yeah, every
man, you know, still smart.
Yes,
but like
smart in an approachable way.
Yeah,
yeah.
And I do think that's interesting, and I wonder if maybe that influences people's perception of him in this role specifically.
Yeah, I don't know. I think because that's the way I would have first interpreted his thing about how Anthony Perkins should have played the character, is that Anthony Perkins has a more introspective, again with Psycho and like the roles I've seen him in, he can do kind of shrewd and calculating and very intelligent.
Right, where you're not really sure what he's about.
Yeah, more so than Jimmy Stewart normally does. But again, I thought Stewart was great in this role and did that just fine. Like I thought I
thought he was great too.
And again, that was just a second layer to it that I wondered is like, I wonder if years later when he was thinking about like when people were kind of talking about the queer subtext and all that sort of stuff, and maybe I don't know.
And Shelby's last comment was, in the radio version, a phone rings after the murder's over. Philip answers, hyperventilates, and hangs up. This is Rupert's suspicious phone call. So we have another comment, or at least one other comment mentioning this. And I'm just going to be honest, by the time I got to the end of the play, I completely forgot that happened. It's like on page 1, like the play opens with it. And then by the time I got to the end, I did not remember that happened.
There you go.
Next comment was from Nathan, who said, I completely agree with Katie about the experience reading rather than seeing the play. I really didn't feel the anxiety without the chest as a visual reminder. The sort of random wandering nature of the conversation could work with great physical performances, but felt really lacking without. I did keep expecting to follow folks into the next room with the books and forgot that it didn't really exist on the stage.
And that's a good point. That's another thing, because it's such a big sort of key to the tension in this story is the chest with the body in it, center stage in the play, I imagine, and center stage in the movie. And when you're reading it, it's very easy to forget that albatross is hanging over this whole thing.
As far as the movie, I gotta admit my blindness to the continuous shots. Even knowing the only thing I noticed was the pan to the back of Brandon's jacket that emerged viewing the actors from a different angle, which I assume was intended to cover a cut.
Yeah, and there are several of those. There's another one where they open the chest and the camera goes up behind it, and that's mostly what it is. And then there are just a few hard cuts. There's I think the clip from the Wikipedia thing, I think the film is 7 shots total or 8 or something like that. So there's 6 or 7 edits in it. And 2 or 3 of them are just straight up cuts. And then the other 4 or 5 are basically just the camera going through somebody's back or into the chest or something like
like
that.
a hidden cut.
Yeah, like hiding it
Like
through
a
like a
TikTok
dark
transition.
And that's and it is the easiest way to do it, even in still modern. Like if you want to do it's very simple. You go over something where something black fills your entire frame, and then you like when somebody puts their like TikTok where somebody puts their hand up to a computer. Yeah, the exact same thing. So
it was honestly a little off-putting, which fits the vibe of the story.
I would agree.
The most noticeable thing to me was how close everyone was together. I felt like Brandon especially was actively trying to be inside everyone else's personal space. Yeah, he's that kind of guy. It created a really claustrophobic vibe and increased the anxiety of things, even when the conversation was innocuous. I agree that both Janet and Brandon's actors nailed their roles, and I would have liked their antagonism to have been even more of a focus. I think it would have made more sense to have Judith be the one to unravel the mystery. The movie, unlike the play, showed her as a willing foil for Brandon, and it would have been a satisfying resolution to have her get the ultimate upper hand rather than having her just kind of exit the play with limited resolution. She also has a more direct emotional connection to the murder than Rupert.
I will agree that I would have liked to see more of her.
Yeah.
Because I liked her character a lot and the interplay she had with like Brandon specifically. I don't know if I think it would have worked. I mean, you can make anything work. Maybe if written really well, it could have worked. But I would have a hard time seeing how making her be the person who unravels the mystery would work as well. Because to me, I think the problem with it is because she has more of a direct emotional connection to the murder. I think she would be too emotionally sort of
like invested and
like when she started suspecting things, I don't know if she would have the emotional distance that Rupert has to be able to like, and the kind of personality to like puzzle it out and put this mystery together in a way where like if she thought, oh, they might have murdered my fiance, right. I don't know if she's gonna like coyly play, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like coyly play. Like, I think she's too close to the murder to, like, be, like, the clever detective, kind of, if that makes sense.
I'll agree that I think you would have to make a lot of other changes for that to, like, work. But I also think that it would have been a really satisfying, like, resolution to watch.
Yeah, I think there could have been a fun way to work her into the ending. Like, I think you could have figured out a way to work her in to the ending somehow. But I think it's really important that Rupert has to confront I think Rupert has enough emotional distance from the victim of the murder to be able to like play this all out as the fun kind of academic exercise that he likes to make everything. And then he has to confront the you know what his philosophizing has wrought. Whereas with Janet, I think once she really got to the point where she was like starting to think these guys might have murdered my boyfriend. Yeah. I don't know if she could keep up the act, or you know what I mean? Like, I just don't know if that would work. Like, it's too close. Like, if like
it would have to be a different story.
It would have to be very different.
It would have to be a different story with a different character. She would have to be more of a Nancy Drew.
Yeah, or something like that. Like I said, I think she's a great foil, and I even would have loved if Rupert did the same thing, but then they found a way, like maybe he brings her into like, I don't know, if they had found a way to bring her back into climax to give her some moment, I think could have been interesting. I just don't know if the characters as written for the majority of the film, if it would make sense for her to kind of replace Rupert in that role. Because again, I just think she would be too emotionally connected to the murder victim to like be the detective. I don't know.
So continuing on here, we're getting into our discussion of, we had a question in the main episode. Yes. Well, I had a question because this is something that's in the play, but not in the movie, about the specific use of a word. Yes. And I'm going to say the word once so we're all on the same page. Yeah. The word is fag. And I had a specific question about how it was used in the play. Yeah. And we did get some feedback on that. So continuing with Nathan's comment, Nathan said, Rope is actually using an original meaning of the F slur, which was until shockingly recently, like the end of the last century, a system in which older boys at British boarding schools would take younger boys as their servants. This was thought to be essential to toughening up boys for adult life. That's very British. This system was rife with physical and sexual abuse, which were largely ignored or even encouraged by the adults. This was distorted sexuality and the fact that younger boys took a subservient, stereotypical feminine role. That was the basis for the F slur we have
and
today.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that I can, that as a backstory or, as an etymology, I guess, totally, I could see that. And it also, you can see that, like the derivations of that with things like, hazing and like fraternities and that kind of thing.
So the play is not explicitly saying that Brandon had a sexual relationship with Kenneth, but it might be implying it. I hesitate to emphasize the line's importance because it's a one-off, and I'm not sure how open folks in 1929...
Hold on, real quick. Sorry. Brandon had a sexual relationship with Kenneth. Who's Kenneth?
Kenneth is the other boy whose name I don't remember.
The other person who was at the party.
Yes.
Whose
name was in the movie was...
No, it was Kenneth in the movie.
Was it?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure, yeah. Kenneth was the other guy who was Janet's old boyfriend who Brandon was trying to get them back together or whatever. Yeah, I'm pretty sure his name was Kenneth in the movie. I just forgot who that was.
Okay.
Because he's only in the movie very briefly, so Okay, sorry.
I hesitate to emphasize the line's importance because it's a one-off, and I'm not sure how open folks in 1929 were about the dark side of British boarding schools. However, I do think the relationship of Brandon and Philip feels like it had that same sort of dynamic with Brandon as the older boy, so I wonder if this is meant as a parallel.
Very well could be.
I could definitely see that.
Yeah.
And then on the same topic, we also had a comment from Eric, who said, F-slurring for someone at school is an older British thing where younger students would do things for older students, sort of like servants.
Yeah.
Cleaning, making their fires, cooking, that kind of thing. More in boarding schools than day schools. No homosexual connotation there.
Well, according to our previous commenter, there was.
But we're going to keep reading.
Okay.
Make advances. I don't know of any other meaning other than trying to make someone's acquaintance or flirting.
Which this is in reference.
This is a different thing we had a question
that you were
about.
unsure about, where it said that the butler that Brandon and Philip had a remark about how they made advances.
Yes, that was
him.
Part of his character description was that his employers sometimes made advances to him.
Yeah.
Eric went on to say, which is odd because the playwright vehemently denied that Brandon and Philip were in a relationship or gay. Though he did say, if anyone, it was Rupert, who does show a bunch of kind of foppish stereotypes.
Which was in the character, or the stage direction,
yes.
for Rupert.
So I'm not sure why he'd put such an overt reference in there, which makes me think I'm missing something. And then Nathan responded to this comment and said, while you're right about the genesis of the F slur, I think it is incorrect to say it has no homosexual connotations. Those relationships were rife with sexual assault, and it's definitely connected to the modern use of the F slur. And Eric said, oh yeah, there was definitely a lot of sexual abuse in those relationships, and I agree, I think it was the genesis for the slur, but in 1929, I don't think it was an explicit gay reference. I think it's more likely it was put in there as a show of dominance, but it's possible it was also a nod to possible homosexuality.
I think it would have been both.
Probably.
Well, if the author didn't, the author probably saw, if the playwright did not think that they had been in a gay relationship or whatever, maybe that's not what. But all this also comes back to what people considered like gay, like the playwright,
which is more complex than just like two people of the same
gender having sexual relationships, because they're very in times like these, it wouldn't be absurd to think that somebody that this playwright could have thought that an older boy forcibly sodomizing a younger boy was not gay.
Yes.
Was in fact something else entirely.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
if you look back at the history of what has been considered homosexual or gay throughout time and culture and place, you will get a wide variety of answers. Yes. So it is a little more complicated than just, were these two engaging in some kind of intimate sexual act?
Yeah.
And Eric came back later and then left another comment and said, finally found the quote I was looking for about this. Part of the reason I think the term wasn't used to intentionally hint towards a possible sexual side to Brandon and Kenneth's relationship is the playwright, Patrick Hamilton, really didn't approve of people reading Brandon or Philip as gay. He felt the person playing Brandon had to be sufficiently masculine, otherwise it would, for some strange reason, appear to be a play about homosexuals. He felt the gay role was Rupert's, as he said in a letter when his brother told him he had been cast as Rupert in a production. Quote, only snag is the part is really cut out for a pansy. That's charming.
Yeah.
I do think there could be a sinister connotation here that their gay teacher infected them with warped philosophy, but he also catches and denounces them, so it muddles things.
I think what's going on here is that the playwright, Mr. Patrick Hamilton, has maybe not the same definitions of what being gay is as maybe some other people do.
Yes.
I think we're operating maybe in that world where he doesn't view like sexually abusing. If you're a guy, if you're, you know, a senior in high school, or just equating this for American audiences to whatever the boarding school nonsense is, I think he might not say, he might have been and this is pure speculation, he might look at like a senior, like in high school or whatever, boy who is like literally engaging in sexual acts with a younger boy under his purview who is like also toting his books around or whatever, and he might look at that and go, well, that guy's not gay, or that guy's not even queer necessarily.
I mean, I think you do have an even closer correlation for Americans that some of us might recognize even more if you brought up fraternities.
Oh, right, like I said
a minute ago. You know, if you have you have this guy who's in a fraternity who is hazing another guy who wants to be in the fraternity, and part of that hazing is some kind of sexual act.
Yeah. That guy making him do the sexual act might not think, or might not describe himself as gay.
He might not describe himself as gay. Could it be considered a homosexual act? Maybe. By some people.
And could he even be queer of some flavor?
Maybe. But he probably is not considering that specific instance to be gay behavior, and probably everyone else that is present there is not considering it gay either.
Yeah.
It's like I said, it is far more complicated than just, you know, who is engaging with who.
Yes, absolutely. As it's clear here, and I think what makes very clear that Patrick Hamilton's kind of view on homosexuality is like not remotely similar to what our modern understanding of homosexuality would be. Like you said, you found this this thing of playwright talking about Brandon. He said he felt that the person playing Brandon had to be sufficiently masculine, otherwise it would, for some strange reason, appear to be a play about homosexuals. You're right, there are no masculine homosexual people. Like if Brandon's masculine, he couldn't possibly also be homosexual. Like it's,
a lot of people still think that.
I know, well, but it's just it's just absurd. You know what I mean? Like it's such a clear, like it's so clear that it, like all of these words have such, you know, kind of context dependent, time dependent, all these different things that, you know, what is considered gay or in one time period isn't in another, and all these sort of things. And it's way more complicated. And
right. Yeah. Well, and if we go back to the specific use of the F slur within the play, I think it can, you know, both things can be true at once, that is, you know, it could be a reference to some kind of act that people might consider homosexual, but it can also be true that maybe the playwright or maybe even the people watching the play in 1929 did not consider it as such.
Yeah.
Like all those things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, those were all of our comments from Patreon. We have a couple others.
The other thing that could happen is that Patrick Hamilton could be grappling with his own sexuality and it leaked into his freaking play, and he wasn't able to come to terms with what the play was actually kind of saying about his own relationships and his own sexuality, and kind of never came to terms with that and just like, no.
Maybe.
I don't know. I'm purely speculating. I'm just saying, like, there's a million different ways to, yeah. Anyways.
I don't know. I did not really do a ton of reading up on Patrick Hamilton, so I could not say. Yeah. Anyway, over on Facebook, we had 2 votes for the movie, 0 for the book. Andy said, "My thoughts won't differ much from the pod discussion. I find it odd that people involved in the film wrote it off. It's one of my favorite Hitchcock films. The staging, long shots, and direction really bring out the main aspects of the play, enhancing it in many ways, which is why I voted for the film. Special mention for the 2 actors playing the murderers. They play off each other well and embody the characters. My year group at college put on the play In the Round at ground level to replicate the feel of the film version. My best friend on our course played the professor, and at the time he was always complaining about other students' overuse of the term Brechian, I believe is how that's pronounced. They made the odd decision to stay in freeze frame through the interval, leaving my friend having to sit still in a chair on set for 15 minutes while people got a drink. That's insane.
Yeah.
Of course, I turned to the student next to me and loudly proclaimed, "This staging is very Brechian." He didn't break, but I was in trouble later.
I don't know what that word means. Do you know what that means?
I looked it up, and now the meaning of it has completely left my
Adjective or
mind.
noun that refers to the theatrical style and techniques of German playwright and poet Bertolt Brecht. But it doesn't go into...
Works aimed to make audiences aware of the world's social and political realities.
Also known for their alienation effect and episodic structure, which involves a montage of disconnected scenes and non-representational staging.
So modern theater.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
No shade to modern theater, but also a little bit of shade to modern theater. On Twitter, we didn't have any comments. We did have 1 vote for the movie, none for the book. On Instagram, we had 4 votes for the movie and 0 for the book. Emily Dinkulik said, "My vote goes to the movie since I'm a huge fan of Hitchcock and have seen a good portion of his filmography. You guys discussed in the prequel episode that the movie has homosexual undertones. I could see Brandon being gay, not sure about Philip. There is something about Brandon's mannerisms and the way he talks that doesn't sound like a straight guy speaking. That could just be the age of the source material."
Yeah, I don't... the things that to me in the film that... Okay, he's about to go on to it here. I say it was the reasons I read Brandon and Philip as gay had very little to do with how they talked or acted.
It really had very little to do with anything about them as individuals.
Yes, and more so to do with the way they interacted with each other.
Furthermore, when Brandon and Philip are arguing, they come across as a married couple, and if by some chance they are a couple.
Yeah, that's what to me comes across is their relationship and the way they interact feels...
Yes.
Like a couple in some ways.
They feel like they're in like a toxic relationship.
Yes, they feel, yes, it very much feels like they're in a very toxic relationship.
Which, and to be fair, you can also be in a toxic relationship with a non-romantic.
Toxic friendship, absolutely.
Yeah, toxic friendship, toxic roommateship.
Acquaintance,
all of those things can happen.
Yeah.
And if by some chance they are a couple, the last scene and the dialogue delivered by James Stewart sounds like an anti-gay message. At least that's how I interpreted it. I know his character was referring to the crime they committed, but I couldn't help seeing it as against the same-sex relationship in 1940s society. Yeah, I guess if you like went in...
Yeah,
like perceiving them as a couple, then I think you could potentially read that meaning into.
Yeah, I don't think there's nothing there.
Denouement.
I didn't get that necessarily, but I don't think there's nothing there. Like I think you could. Yeah,
I think it's definitely an interesting read on it.
Yeah, for sure.
Aside from that, the movie still holds up as a great thriller. The only nitpick I had with rewatching the movie was the scream at the beginning, which was poorly delivered.
We agree.
Much love to both of you and keep up the great work.
Thank you.
And then over on Goodreads, we had 1 vote for the movie, 0 for the book. And Miko said, I feel like the movie improves the play in multiple ways, but mainly I think it flows much better. For example, at the beginning, there was a lot of, as you know, dialogue between the murderers establishing things. The movie's dialogue also feels much more natural and subtle compared to the, oh, I have a body in the chest, haha, just joking of the play. I also did not really care for that aspect of the play. John Dahl as Brandon Shaw stole the show. I personally also enjoyed Janet, both the character and the actress. She has a couple good eye rolls in the background when Brandon is butting into the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Rupert's stance about murder feels like the worst choice of the movie, especially how he flips in the end. Like, you never considered that the outcome of thinking murdering inferiors is fine would be murder? Weren't you supposed to be smart? He is, but he's too smart.
Yes, that's
He's
the problem. He's
smart.
too smart, which is why...
Which brings him right back around to stupid.
being stupid, yep. And not realizing that the things he say could affect things and matter, and people could, we already discussed.
Also, why is the play called Rope? It's such an inconsequential part of the play that I believe Patrick Hamilton intended the murder to happen like the Bobby Franks murderers planned, strangling with one person holding each end of the rope. Making the rope a bigger part of the movie was a good choice.
Yeah, because you mentioned in the play you weren't sure if the rope with the books and stuff was even the same rope.
I wasn't sure how heavily it was supposed to factor in.
Whereas the movie makes it very clear that the rope is important.
And I was waiting for the rope to be important as I was reading the play.
Yeah.
The titular rope, as it were. There appears to be a setup for Rupert's suspicions in the play. Very early on, there's a phone call that Philip answers. Presumably due to the storm, he cannot hear anything. But Brandon arrives and comments, will you put down the receiver? You're telling London you're afraid. I assume this and Philip's yell just prior to put the lights out is what Rupert heard. Huh. I don't even remember this or connect it to Rupert's call when I read the play, and it didn't help that the play couldn't keep the time of the call consistent. 8:45 or 8:45. Yeah, that was kind of the same experience that I had, that by the time I got to the end of the play, I had completely forgotten that happened because so little was made of it. Miko's last comment here was, seeing the play performed would probably make me like it more, but still the movie wins.
There you go.
So our winner this time was the movie with 11 votes to the books 2.
All right. Thank you all very much for all that very detailed feedback. We really do. I love hearing what people have to say and getting to discuss it. It's maybe my favorite part of the podcast, mainly because we don't have to do any work for it. We just get to read and react, which is fun.
That's true. That is true. And I will say, if I ever were to get the chance to see this play performed live, I would be interested.
Oh, yeah, I would absolutely go see it. Like if our local theater did it.
Nothing else than to see like how I feel about it. Watching it.
It'd be interesting to see if they make, because you've read it, it'd be interesting to see if they did make any changes, like based on the movie, how you talked about, like making the rope a more prominent piece, or some of the other changes that the film made, if the play would, a modern version of the play would do that or not. So yeah. All right, we do not have a learning things segment this week because we had so much good listener feedback, but we do have our preview, and we're going to start first with Vampire Academy, the book.
When was the last time you ate?
Are you sure about this?
Bon appetit.
Thanks.
What are friends for?
I should probably point out that my best friend, Lissa Dragomir, is a royal member of an ancient race. And yeah, like most creatures with fangs, they live off blood. My name is Rose Hathaway, and I've been sworn to protect the royal bloodline with my life.
Look alive! Rose Hathaway is wild, dangerous,
insubordinate.
Right here, folks. Right here.
I heard you were good at taking on 2 guys at once.
And this is Vampire Academy.
Vampire Academy is a young adult urban fantasy novel by American author Rochelle Mead, and it is the first book in a series of 6. And if you're into urban fantasy, you might recognize some of Mead's other work. If you're not into urban fantasy, you probably won't. But she also wrote the Georgina Kincaid series, the Dark Swan series, and the Bloodline series, which is a Vampire Academy spinoff. I think Vampire Academy was probably her biggest series out of everything, I think.
I had never heard of it, so I've never heard of any of those, so.
Vampire Academy borrows some pretty specific creature names from Eastern European folklore. I started Googling as soon as I encountered these as I was reading because I wanted to know if she was making shit up or if it was... but it actually is like stuff from Eastern European folklore.
I have heard of these, like I think like they show up a lot of times in like fantasy novel, like video games and stuff
I
like that.
would not be surprised if you've encountered them in like video games and stuff.
I know Dampier and at least two of these I have seen mentioned in like video games and stuff.
So I just wanted to give like a brief overview of what those were. So she uses 3 different creatures. The first one is the Moroi, which is a type of vampire or ghost from Romanian folklore. And, you know, as with most concepts in folklore, the exact characteristics that we're just ascribing to this creature are, you know, varied from source to source. Yeah. But in some versions, it's like the phantom of a dead person that leaves the grave to draw energy from the living, hence the vampire connotation.
Yes. They're energy vampires.
Yes, because a vampire doesn't always need to be drinking blood. Sometimes they absorb other things. Rochelle,
sometimes they're Colin Robinson.
Sometimes they are. Rochelle Mead's Moroi are mortal vampires who possess elemental magic. So they need blood to live. So far, not clear why they need blood to live, but they have like normal lifespans. Yeah, they're not immortal. They don't live forever. She also uses the Dhampir, which is a mythical creature from Balkan folklore that's often said to be the result of a union between a vampire and a human. And Mead actually stayed pretty close to the source material on this one. Her Dhampirs can be the offspring of a human and a Moroi, or a Dhampir and a Moroi. And her Dhampirs possess increased strength and speed, and basically serve as like bodyguards for the Moroi.
So she was creating like character classes.
Yes, basically.
Or like
the Dhampir are her warrior class.
Yeah, or divergent houses or whatever.
I have
Potter houses.
I have
whatever.
Many comparisons to make to many different things with this series. Yeah. And the last one that she uses, or at least I have not encountered any other mythological creatures in this yet. I'm about halfway through the book. Is the Strigoi. Strigoi comes from Romanian mythology, and they are troubled spirits that are said to have risen from the grave. So this is kind of our most solid link to what we now think of as a vampire. It's thought that Bram Stoker's Dracula was like a modern interpretation of the Strigoi myth. And in Vampire Academy, the Strigoi are like the big bads. I have not actually met any yet, but I have heard much about them, and they are always hunting Moroi to turn them into Strigoi as well. And they're also the only immortal creatures in the novel.
There you go. I think I realized where I may have heard a lot of these from. I think they show up in The Witcher.
That does not surprise me at all.
I think because it's based on
because The Witcher, is very steeped in like Eastern European folklore as well.
Some country like I can't remember, but like wherever the author's from, Poland maybe or whatever. But yeah, it's Europe, Eastern European kind of like folklore stuff for the most part. That all the monsters come from. So I think a lot of those have showed up in The Witcher.
So the book did receive positive reviews. It has a Goodreads average of 4.19 out of 5. It was listed on the list of quick picks for reluctant young adult readers and recommended by Booklist, teenbooks2.com, and Voice of Youth Advocates. So
there you go.
People liked it.
It was popular, at least.
It was popular at one time.
Never like a world sensation like Twilight or
but
a Divergent even
I forgot
to some
put
extent.
The year in this, but hang on.
I imagine
This came out in 2007.
Oh, okay.
The book did, the first book. So like very squarely within the Twilight heyday.
Absolutely. All right. Time now to learn a little bit more about Vampire Academy, the film.
This is a possible successor to the throne.
Should know by now if us weird doesn't begin to cover it. Oh my god. I don't know what's gonna happen tonight. At this point, I can't remember who loves us and who hates us. Let's make tonight our bitch.
There's a bigger threat still out there.
Let's just keep our heads down and stay under the radar.
How's that under the radar plan working out, Highness?
Not so much.
Vampire Academy is a 2014 film directed by Mark Waters, who we've actually done a film from before because he directed Freaky Friday, Mean Girls, The Spiderwick Chronicles, and Mr. Popper's Penguins, among others. Very diverse category, but some fair amount of adaptations in there. And this film, this is really interesting to me, is written by Mark's older brother, Daniel Waters, who's a screenwriter who did Heathers, which I've never seen, but is a kind of a cult classic.
Yeah.
Hudson Hawk, which is like kind of a notoriously weird Bruce Willis movie from I think it's like almost like a comedy film noir kind of thing. I've never seen it, but I've heard it talked about. Batman Returns and Demolition Man, among others. He also has a very kind of chaotic filmography. The film stars Zoe Deutsch, Lucy Fry, Danila Kozlovsky, Dominic Sherwood, Cameron Monaghan, Sammy Gale, Sarah Hyland, Claire Foy, Edward Holcroft, Chris Mason, Jolie Richardson, Olga Kurilenko, and Gabriel Byrne. It has a 17% on Rotten Tomatoes, a 31 on Metacritic, and a 5.4 out of 10 on IMDb. And it made $15.4 million against a budget of $30 million.
Woof.
Pretty huge bomb, both critically and box office wise. It was nominated for 2 Teen Choice Awards for Best Comedy and Best Comedy Actress for Zoe Deutsch. Which is interesting because is the novel a comedy?
I would not have called it a comedy.
The film, I'm not sure. I don't know. It comedy on IMDb was like the 4th genre description. It was like fantasy, whatever, coming of age, something, and then like comedy was on there. So maybe the movie decided to go more of like a satirical or campy or something. I don't know. No idea.
I mean, I will say that having read what I've read so far, I think it could lend itself well to camp.
Yeah. I'm hoping it's camp. I'm like, that's what I'm hoping is that it's got all these terrible reviews and stuff because everybody was just like, oh, it's like bad Twilight, whatever. But actually it's going to be like peak camp and going to be really good. That's my secret hope is that surprise Vampire Academy 2014 is this great camp cult masterpiece that people are sleeping on. I doubt that's going to be the case, but I am hoping that's the case. You never know. Sometimes that happens. So Prager Entertainment optioned the rights for the book, for the series actually, in 2010. And they announced that the Waters brothers would be writing and directing in 2012. I don't have a ton of notes about this because there just wasn't that much. And I could not be bothered to go do a bunch of research on Vampire Academy. Early in the production process, the film was apparently retitled to Vampire Academy Blood Sisters, and Wikipedia said that was the first book's actual title. Is that not accurate?
That did not come up.
Okay, because Wikipedia, maybe the book got retitled to reflect the movie. I don't know.
Or I did see. I saw like a movie poster that said that.
Well, so the movie was retitled at one point in production to Vampire Academy Blood Sisters, because they were going to make a series and they wanted each movie to have its own like subtitle. Then later on in the production process, they reverted that back to just Vampire Academy. I don't know how far in the production process, and again, I couldn't be bothered to go look. My guess would be that maybe they were going to do Vampire Academy Blood Sisters when they were planning to make a whole series, and then at some point in the production process, they realized either this sucks or this is going to bomb, or maybe while it was bombing, they reverted. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Or maybe after it bombed even, they reverted the name back to, I have no idea. But they changed it back to just Vampire Academy, probably because they knew they weren't going to make sequels. You didn't mention it. There is another adaptation of this. Peacock made a series like
Oh yeah,
2 years
that's
ago.
right.
So
That's right.
I think that also got canceled, but there is a TV version of this from 2022 that I believe also got canceled after like 1 or 2 seasons, but I could be wrong about that. So the exteriors of the Academy were filmed at Charterhouse School in Surrey in England. And Mark Waters said when he saw, as soon as I saw that courtyard, I had that exhilarating feeling of everything locking into place. This school was not just my mental image of St. Vladimir's, it was better.
Ooh.
And if you look this up, this thing has this school has appeared in quite a few TV shows and films over the years. It's one of those schools that just looks like an old. It looks like Hogwarts or whatever.
Yeah,
kind of
looks like a fantasy school.
Yeah. So there are Psyhounds in the film. I don't know. That's what the thing said. And the Psyhounds in the film were originally filmed using trained dogs, but Waters was not happy with how they looked, so they replaced them with CGI dogs that were apparently modeled off a drawing that Rochelle Mead made for Waters.
I'm so excited about
sure
that.
Those are going to look great.
I'm so excited.
This was supposedly the film. I think it is the film debut for Lucy Fry, who's one of the main characters, but also supposedly the film debut for Anya Taylor-Joy. She has an uncredited cameo as Feeder Girl, but apparently the scene was deleted in the final cut of the film, so she doesn't actually appear in the film, but she filmed a scene for the movie in her first role. There is an actor an author cameo in the film. Rochelle Mead, you can see her walking past the doors after Mr. Meisner's class, supposedly, according to IMDb. This is another IMDb trivia fact. Director Mark Waters wanted to give the franchise a second chance with a sequel, specifically Vampire Academy Frostbite. I guess that's the second novel.
I believe that is the name of the second book, is Frostbite.
Prager Entertainment agreed to fund the film on the condition that Waters could get fans to raise the necessary $1.5 million on their own as a proof of support for the film.
What?
An Indiegogo campaign was started and ran from August of 2014 to September of 2014, but fans were only able to raise $250,000 by the end of the month, leading to Prager Entertainment canceling plans for a sequel. So getting to some critical reviews. First off, this film was not screened for critics, meaning they didn't get early advanced screening. Obviously, they went and saw it when it came out, but they didn't do an advanced screening for critics, which is often a sign that it's not good because they don't want a bunch of critics giving it 0 stars before it comes out and getting people not going to see it. Writing for Rolling Stone, Peter Travers gave the film 0 out of 4 stars, saying, quote, "One idea mixed with lame jokes and stretched beyond coherence. Vampire Academy doesn't need a review. It needs a stake in the heart." End quote.
Wow.
Dennis Harvey for Variety said, quote, "It's the crassest possible mashup of Harry Potter and Twilight elements," and compared it negatively to both. Manola Dargis for the New York Times said, quote, "Mr. Waters doesn't seem especially interested in the supernatural parts of Vampire Academy, and he clearly didn't have the budget to make what little hocus pocus is there magical." And the performances also received mixed responses from critics. With Susan Zolcina, Wazolcina. I don't know. It's a Polish name, I think, that I cannot pronounce. I'm sorry. I've had this name. I got to look this up because she shows up every now and then writing for Roger Ebert. She had a negative review for Deutsch's performance, comparing it to Elliot Page's performance in Juno, but like a bad version of that, basically. Writing for the New York Daily News, Jordan Hoffman called her work the film's quote-unquote breakout performance and actually positively compared it to Elliot Page's performance in Juno.
Okay, hang on. Hang on.
2 different critics compared it to Elliot Page and Juno.
I'm interested to see. It's been, I don't think I've seen Juno since it came out. Yeah. But I'm interested to understand why they would make that comparison specifically.
My guess is because of how, like, I think Juno came out a few years before this, relatively close to it, and it's the like go-to example of like a snarky, sarcastic lead.
Yeah, I guess
would be my guess.
Because to me, the more obvious comparison is Twilight.
I haven't seen the film, so I don't know. But my guess, comparing it to Elliot Page's performance in Juno, I've seen Juno. I saw it back when it came out, and Page's performance in that is like very snarky, kind of like
sarcastic,
and not really like an actual teenager.
I am. That's fair. I am interested to like watch it and see if I can figure out exactly what prompted that comparison.
Yeah,
specifically.
2 different critics.
Yeah.
But Hoffman, who gave a positive comparison to Page's performance, did criticize Gabrielle Byrne's performance as, quote, obligatory slumming, end quote, and described Kozlovsky's acting as, quote, so expressionless that he can, in all honesty, now say that he never acted in anything called Vampire Academy, end quote. Also criticizing Byrne, Richardson, and Kurylenko. And Travers, who was the critic writing for Rolling Stone earlier, also panned the Byrne, Richardson, and Kurylenko, saying, quote, they are bringing shame on all of their reputations, end quote.
I love film critics.
Yeah.
What a dramatic bunch.
Yes. So not good reviews all around. We wanted to remind you can do us all a favor by hanging on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads, Threads, any of those places. Interact. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Drop us a 5-star rating, write us a nice little review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to us. And you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/thisfilmislit. Get access to bonus content. We're going to be doing our Addams Family episodes here very shortly for October. But if you support us at the $15 and up level, you get priority patron request recommendation, whatever you want to call it. And this one is a patron request.
Yes, this was a request from Nathan, who I can only assume wants to torture us.
I think this is I want you to rip on this ridiculous thing, which is why I'm defiantly insistent on finding it to be peak camp and actually good.
I don't have a ton of hope based on what I've read so far.
Yeah. We'll see. Katie, where could people watch it?
Well, as always, you can check with your local library or a local video rental store if you still have one. Other than that, if you're not going to sail the high seas, you're going to have to pay to watch this because it's not streaming with a subscription anywhere, but you can rent it for around $4 from Apple TV, Amazon, YouTube, or Fandango at home.
There you go. Go check out Vampire Academy, because in 1 week's time, we'll be talking about it. Until that time, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and everybody else,
keep reading books,
watching movies,
and keep being awesome.